Agriculture, and broken down, the collection from tax revenue accounted for 22.8 billion, non-tax 6.1 billion, and 1.1 billion from grants. So for the same period, the second quarter of 2021, collections from tax revenue accounted for 19.4 billion, non-tax 11 billion, and 762.6 million was from grants. For the second quarter of 2022, the preliminary figures indicate that the government has released a total of 31.7 billion to finance public service delivery, and that's against the projected expenditure of 41.8. For the corresponding period of 2021, the government released 45.3 billion to finance public service delivery, and that was against a projected amount of 29.1 billion. In terms of the details of the revenue performance, that's found on page 3. Total collections of revenues and grants amounted to 30 billion, and that was 5% above the budget target of 28.4 billion. Tax revenue for the period amounted to 22.8 billion, non-tax 6.1 billion, and 1.1 billion was from grants. So most of the tax revenues were below target, except for income tax and insurance premium levy. Non-tax revenues were also below target, mostly on account of underperformance in mineral royalty, road tolls, and RATSA collection. By contrast, in the second quarter of 2021, except for excise duty and export duties, all the tax types performed above the target. Non-tax revenues were also above target, mostly boosted by over-collection, dividends, and on-lending in mineral royalty tax. The excellent revenue performance has been enhanced by sustained implementation of key strategies as enshrined in ZRA's corporate plan. Some of the strategies include extensive use of data and intelligence to unearth unpaid taxes, the use of technology to simplify tax processes, taxpayer engagements and education, customer support programs, which have led to improved voluntary compliance and tax base expansion. Which was an objective towards bringing on board taxpayers previously not paying taxes. Other strategies by ZRA include enhanced active surveillance and enforcement operations, which have been reinforced by collaboration with other government agencies. Proceeding to income tax at the bottom of page 4. Income tax collections amounted to 15.2 billion against the target of 3.5 billion and were above target by 22%. The boost in revenue collection has primarily been attributed to a strong performance in the mining sector as companies took advantage of the increasing copper prices on the metal exchange markets. The non-mining increase in revenue collections within the financial sector and telecommunications sectors was as a result of an increase in demand for the services as brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic. Looking at company tax, collections amounted to 8.8 billion, and that was against a target of 6 billion, and that represented a positive collection variance of 2.8 billion, or 47%. Mining tax amounted to 5.9 billion against the target of 4.2 billion, and that represented a positive collection variance of 43%. The positive outturn is mainly attributed to higher declarations by major mining companies amidst higher copper prices. For non-mining tax, collections amounted to 2.9 billion against the target of 1.8 billion, representing a positive collection variance of 56%. The recorded surplus was due to upward adjustments of annual provisional declarations made during the period under review. For pay, total collection amounted to 4.15 billion against the target of 4.21, representing a negative collection variance of 2%. The performance is attributed to non-payment of obligations by taxpayers due to cash flow challenges, and most of which are mining firms. If I can jump to value-added tax, VAT collection amounted to 4.9 billion against a target of 5.9 billion and was below the target by 17%. For domestic VAT, the underperformance is attributed to low payment compliance by withholding VAT agents, with most of them requesting for offsets against liabilities owed to them. For import VAT, the underperformance is attributed mostly to reduced import volumes, especially copper concentrates and cane sugar. For the insurance premium levy, collection for the quarter amounted to 52.6 million against a target of 10.9 million. This was 380% above the target, and this was attributed to the increase in renewals of insurance policies during the period under review. For customs and excise duty, total collection under this tax type amounted to 1.4 billion against a target of 1.5 billion, representing an under-collection of 10%. For excise duty, total collection was 1.1 billion against a target of 1.5 billion, representing an under-collection of 25%. Excise duty underperformed due to a removal of fuel levy on diesel and a reduction of the duty rate on petrol following the implementation of statutory instrument number 2 of 2022. If I can move on to non-tax revenue. Collections under this category amounted to 6.1 billion against a target of 6.3 billion, and this was below target by 4%. The underperformance is mainly attributed to a lower than projected collection in mineral royalty due to the slowdown of operations of the smelters at KCM and Mopani copper mines, which have affected production. Road tolls collection also underperformed, arising from reduced vehicle traffic during the period under review. For the same quarter in 2021, collections amounted to 11 billion and were over 200% above the target. That performance was mainly explained by the receipt of a dividend from the Bank of Zambia on mineral royalty collection owing to a higher than projected copper price. For grants received in the second quarter of 2022 amounted to 1.1 billion and were 140% above the target. And this was due to increased inflows from some cooperating partners. For the expenditure performance, during the period under review, preliminary figures indicate that government released a total of 31.7 billion to finance public service delivery. Of the total expenditure, 31.4 billion was financed from domestic resources, while 394 million was financed by foreign sources. For personal emoluments, government released 9.4 billion on costs relating to the public service wage bill and overseas allowances in order to achieve the timely payment of salaries of various public service workers, including teaching, medical, and security personnel. For use of goods and services, in order to support operations of various public institutions, government released 3.6 billion for general government operations. This was 34.7 above the projection due to higher releases towards drugs and medical supplies, which accounted for 1.3 billion of the total releases under this category. Other notable releases included 240 million kwacha to the Zambia Statistical Agency to facilitate the undertaking of the census, 148 million for foreign finance projects in 9 ministries, and 100 million to the compensation fund. In terms of the debt service during the period amounted to 8.7 billion, comprising domestic service debt payments of 8 billion, which included principal repayments on commercial bank facilities of 244.2 million. On the other hand, external debt service, mainly to multilaterals, amounted to 697 million, principal repayments amounting to 508.6 million. If I can jump to social benefits, releases under this category amounted to 508 billion and were released towards the social cash transfer program. In terms of transactions in non-financial assets, government released 3.3 billion for non-financial assets. This performance was 40.7% below the target. Notable releases include 1.8 billion for road projects and 1.3 billion for ordinary capital projects. Transactions in financial assets and liabilities, releases under this category amounted to 1.9 billion and were below the projection by 14.7%. This amount went towards dismantling fuel arrears and arrears to various suppliers of goods and services, as well as the citizens' economic empowerment under the Ministry of Small and Medium Enterprises. For financing over the period under review comprised 2.6 billion from government securities, 2.6 billion from the special drawing rights allocation, and 697.7 million from the World Bank for the implementation of the FRESH project. I'll now hand over to
on critical information that may assist the committee to effectively review the 2022 budget. So we note that the national budget is quite a fundamental policy instrument that shows how government will prioritize and achieve its annual and multi-annual objectives. Therefore, Parliament is constitutionally mandated to scrutinize and approve the national budget, as this is one of the core functions of the National Assembly. And so reviewing the performance of the budget is quite cardinal actively by Parliament, because it holds the executive accountable for its actions and policy implementation. This also allows the Parliament to effectively ensure that the executive adhere to prudent financial management and fiscal targets, whilst maintaining the aggregate fiscal discipline and ensuring that public resources are utilized equitably, efficiently, and effectively. So in fulfilling one of its mandates of engaging with the budget process at all stages of its cycle, the Parliament and the Budgeting Committee would consider some of the following reference points in which would actually help in reviewing the budget performance. So the first aspect is reviewing the budget. It has been established that there are several variances in the budget between planned and actual expenditures, and therefore it is necessary that the spending and revenue generation agencies need to account for these differences to enable the committee effectively take action and control the reported variances based on the reasons established. Modification of the budget could be arrived at by following the laid down guidelines and procedures, and budget leaks would be identified at this point, as well as measures put in place to prevent such future problems or occurrences. Further, the committee could actually consider outcome from these budgets as another important reference point in its review of sector budgets. So this will enable the provision of feedback on forecasting capacities, as well as documentation of outcomes, accuracy, and shortcomings. This will allow for realistic forecasting in future. Then we move on to recommendations. The Policy Monitoring and Research Center has got some of the few recommendations to make to the committee. We are adding that government is encouraged to continue on the path of fiscal discipline as envisioned from what has happened in the second quarter performance. In the second quarter performance, we saw that expenditure was 10.1 billion, below the target compared to second quarter of 2021, when expenditure was 17.2 billion, quarter above the target. We also urge that line ministries and institutions should submit monthly reports to support information availability in the quarterly review, which will subsequently feed into a more comprehensive midterm review. All supplementary budgets should be backed and supported by a detailed policy analysis concerning how the proposed supplementary budget can actually affect both the country's revenue and expenditure plans, as well as its overall benefit to the economy and society at large. Because quarterly reviews and reports are key accountability documents, the committee also needs to ensure that the public funds that have been spent on their intended purposes, and that anything that raises any query should be dealt with by relevant authorities, particularly if coupled with sanctions for non-compliance. Parliament should also consider enshrining fiscal discipline rules in a stronger legal framework of fiscal responsibility laws. A legal base for this will give clear disciplinary actions to any individuals found wanting in terms of misapplication of public funds. It has been well noted and documented that countries that have been unsuccessful in implementation of fiscal responsibility laws have also in general failed to implement good practice in fiscal transparency. As government prepares for the launch of the 8th National Development Plan, expenditure on dissemination, translation, and many others must be kept to budgeted amounts. In this regard, government should call upon all its cooperating partners to aid in the dissemination of the 8th National Development Plan. Tax measures instituted in the 2022 national budget need to be reviewed in the mid-term to assess their impacts on how it has affected revenue. Then we should also note that the war in Ukraine continues to cause food and fuel crisis. The situation calls for government to quickly align spending in the agricultural sector to support key drivers of growth in the sector, including ensuring that extension services, crop production, research and development, livestock management and production, disease control and irrigation are looked at. These measures have the potential to grow the agricultural sector and reduce inequalities, as well as earn the necessary foreign exchange through the existing markets that have been opened up as a result of reduced food imports from Ukraine. I think these measures are quite critical, owing to the fact that there's just so much being talked about in terms of potential, and we still continue to wonder when this potential will turn into serious actualization of its benefits. Thank you, Mr. Office.
Under non-tax revenue, as a committee, we strongly believe that this impact is one of the line items, if well managed, can enhance income revenue generation by the government. But we are seeing also the concerns, like I'll give an example, like we were mentioning, the road tolling system recorded that for the first time a reduction in terms of what they are collecting. And also then you also mentioned the other line is the issue of the MRT. The mineral tax we have seen is not performing well. Now, in the case of the MRT, if I was to start with that one, you may be aware that in fact now currently there is I saw a report which was indicating that two of the big mines, in terms of the what you call it, the copper grade, they are hitting now low grade in terms of the copper. That is one which also affects their productivity. And at the same time, if you look at the budget presented by the finance minister, there's an indication that in the next 10 years, where we need to hit about 3 million tons. By that time, it's per year. With this now, how does it sit? Is it an issue where we should start getting worried now to say that target might not be met? Or is it the issue whereby we see, for a long time we have been changing our mining taxes in terms of the system. This time you do this, tomorrow you are doing this, you go back forth, and the mines have been complaining because of that instability. They can't predict what type of taxes they're going to have flowing year or so. Don't you think that also is an aspect that which we need to worry about? So that's my second. Then the third, I come back now to the issues of the tolling collections where we have seen the reduction. In your view, what has caused this? Almost for the first time where we see the reduction, where we're not meeting the target.
With the mining, in as much as we have talked about the issue of moving towards the actualization of the 3 million metric tons in the next decade, the country ought to understand that there's a number of parameters that ought to be put in place. One of it is the regulations on policy. Apart from that, there are a number of key sectors that support the mining sector for it to actually thrive and be able to encourage much more of its production. And one of it is, first of all, we need to ensure that we align our energy in line with the anticipated production. But now to say, with regards to this low collection of non-tax revenue, especially from the mining sector, we realize that also we have had a number of multi-economic facility zones in Kitwe, in whatever. But then what you realize is that the there is, for Zambia, actually, you realize that most of the smelting is done in Kitwe and partly in Kitwe, Chingola, and partly and Chambishi. But then the question is that why are we not matching the capacity of our production with our capacity to handle smelting in terms of value addition? Because you realize that there is no way a mining company can actually increase its production when they know that what they are going to basically take to the smelt is actually sequenced to be or forecasted to a lower quantum. And so we still need a lot of expansion in those supporting pillars, so as to ensure that the mining, because the mineral royalties actually it's about what you get from the soil, and so they will actually, the mining companies will basically reduce or declare small quantums in terms of what they are mining from their mines, so that it matches with the capacity of the smelters where they are taking these raw materials. I think that is one of the reasoning that we probably are putting across. But again, in terms of actualizing the 3 million metric ton, we are actually conducting a study to try and understand what key pillars underpin that will support the actualization of the 3 million metric ton, and inform government as well as key stakeholders in terms of what ought to be done in the mining sector with regards to putting an enabling environment that will actually allow the country to reach that level of production.
Then the northern route, Copper Belt going to Northern Province, the roads have been very bad. And there's so much traffic such that the volumes that are passing are being reduced, where maybe 2 cars should pass in an hour, or 10 cars should pass in an hour. The numbers are reducing because the roads are very bad. If you are going to the Copper Belt, no matter what time you leave Lusaka, even if you leave at 4, you find there's so much traffic there. So the traffic volumes are a lot such that cars are moving slow. The turnover of going to this road has really become bad. So I think the bad roads also are attributing to how much revenue can be collected, because the roads are really slow. So on that one, really maybe it's also to say this road, especially the northern road, should really be worked on. In addition to the issues of mineral royalties, and that, as we've said, that some of our big mines, the grades of the ore right now that they have seems of low quality. So meaning there's need to, within those mining firms, to carry out some more of geological surveys to see also what they have. Or it's an issue of digging deeper, but that requires a lot of financing and refinancing. But if you look at our country risk premium is very high compared to our neighbors. Zimbabwe actually has been moved on that list. Now we have Botswana with 2%, but ourselves, Zambia, we've moved from 10 last year to 16%. So for a company or anybody to borrow money outside the country, that's how expensive it is, because our banks, there's how much they can give an individual or one borrower. So then it's important to see then what measures can put in place to ensure that refinancing and reinvestment into these mining sectors is made cheaper, in order for us first to increase investment in the existing mines, and then also to see how reinvestments can be made in the new areas that we need to survey and see what minerals we may have, especially copper, in order for us to reach the 3 million metric tons.
Okay, for this point. Like the road from Lusaka to Mo, they are all two tokens. And the difference between the one in the Mungu and the one in the Mo, they are 500 kilometers. In between, motor vehicles are just passing. Do you think that they are going to be effective, or they reduce the revenues on tokens? Thank you.
The one you highlighted on the mineral royalty tax. This is a subject that has created a lot of debate. And then upon its introduction, the argument by government was that they needed to, it's an incentive to free up capital, to attract more investment in the mining sector. What has been the performance of this measure by government? What would you advise? Where are we now? Because I think it has been highlighted in a number of reports that there's been an effect in revenue collection because of these incentives. Are we on the right trajectory as a country?
New mining tax regime was at 83%, which was higher than the global target of 40 for open pit and 52 for underground. So the removal of the non-deductibility, then the introduction of that, made our tax rate move to 76, but it's still high. And it's this tax rate that also is discouraging. So it's an issue of, it's a complex issue of reinvestment. Yes, one part, there's the introduction of non-deductibility, which has reduced the tax rate from 83 to 76. But then also, there's an issue of reinvestment also has to do with the rate of borrowing, like the amount, how much it takes for you to borrow. Our country, there's how much, as I've said, there's how much we can borrow in the country, especially for big mining. There's not enough money from our banks that can lend even one mining sector, let's say, even just for exploration. That's why, like in other countries right now, if you go to Zimbabwe, you realize like in Victoria, they have put up all these incentives where now a lot of miners from South Africa are rushing there because the tax rate is low. Their premium risk to borrow is at zero. They've been removed on that list. And thirdly, for them, they've introduced citizens should buy shares on the stock exchange for new explorations. And that has really worked. Right now, people are celebrating in Victoria, just here where we can drive. So those are some of the lessons then we can learn to say, well, yes, the mineral royalty has really reduced our tax rate towards the best practice of 40 and 52. But then also our risk premium, that's something that we really need to work on. And how can this be worked on? One of the key measures that can help us reduce this 16% is if we get the IMF deal, meaning there's this guarantee of these lenders will be guaranteed that their money, as it comes to Zambia, they do not risk leaving their money and losing it out. And then coming to targets, really, I don't know really what they use to determine how many tokens should be put in an area. Because if we compare maybe the volumes of traffic this side and Western Province, I think maybe Western Province should have few. So maybe those are some of the clarities that they use, specifications that they may choose for targets.
There are a number of myriad reasons. One of it has to do with the economic activities in that area. I think if you compare the Western route, most of them, if you either you use the Livingstone route, some of them end up to Katimangu road, and if you use the Mongu road, they are all ending up to Katimangu. But then one of the key issue also is that sometimes even the National Road Fund Agency, they are also looking at the cost of operating these tolls against how much they can collect within the distance in between. But in terms of what determined the amount of collection last year and this year, you would actually see that some of the things that we can talk about is that you and I think members of parliament, you would travel from Lusaka to your various constituencies, and now because our incomes are limited, they are at some level, but meanwhile there are certain things that are increasing, especially when it comes to fuel. Okay, for an ordinary person who has been stagnant for a salary, that is, it's also another contributing factor in terms of how many times can I rush and visit even my relatives. And then also, for the buses, some of them will have to think which route is much more profitable in terms of the out time. So those are some of the factors that you probably also think through. It could actually be a study to validate this with the National Road Fund Agency, where you see whether any price increase, say in fuel, may actually alter the number of volumes in terms of traffic flows. Because that is also, movement is also determined by the cost. You can't just move anyhow when you know that this cost that is associated by movement, you have got an opportunity cost of doing other things out of that.
Number one, we have talked about where we need to, maybe I can read it. I said, in reviewing the budget, it has been established that there are several variances in the budget between planned and actual expenditure. And then we are urging us that it is necessary that the spending and the revenue generation agencies need to account for these variances. Have you taken interest at the researching institute to find out at least one or two reasons why these variances do occur? What do you think the key reasons for these variances? That's number one. Then on page number 10, under your recommendations, I've read point number 2, where you are in fact recommending that these line ministries and institutions should submit monthly reports to support the information availability in the portal review. I'm interested in terms of the monthly reports. When you say they should submit monthly reports, to who should these monthly reports be submitted, and what is the current arrangement?
Because maybe for grant-aided institutions, their monies come from the underlying ministries. And for the councils, the money comes from, there's also how money comes from. So, like these monthly reports should be submitted to the higher authority, who should submit eventually to Ministry of Finance. Because there's a situation, but it's been hard at times to do budget tracking. Because you say in a budget, there's this much that is supposed to be released for social cash transfer. And maybe government to say this much was released. But the people who are spending, you ask them, how was this money spent? Maybe those are some of the things that eventually maybe people start to put together and realize that they're important maybe when we're trying to audit. But it should be like a deliberate policy to say these monthly submissions should be made to ensure that there's real accountability. I think there's this provision for those that adherence has been an issue, because it's a matter that if you go to a spending agency, you need to ask them, have you received this money? Even just for them to confirm receipt of that money is really hard at times. Because this is why if you say in this year, there was this much that was put in the Ministry of Health, we want now to interrogate to say, oh, this money that was allocated, what percentage were you given for medicine, were you given in the agricultural sector for irrigation? So that is, at times it's really hard to really get that information, which is key for budget tracking. And then coming to the issue of variances, really we have not really done a study to see maybe what is some of the cause of these variances. But maybe like for this year, any other variances that we are experiencing, maybe giving an example of the monthly fuel reviews. It's hard to plan and really say your budget will not vary. An example is ourselves. We've been carrying out a study from May, June, July. So the fuel has been 24, 26 months. So it's hard to even budget. You submit a budget of maybe 200,000, but you need to be adding addendums every time when you're going in the field. So if you left on Monday, it was the 20th. 2 weeks later, you need to submit another addendum that fuel has increased. So these are some of those are some of the variances we've been experiencing as a department ourselves.